Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Last time I was on here, I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before, but we did the quarterback predictions, seeing which QBs would do what, how many passing yards they'd have, how many passing touchdowns, and if they were a running threat, how many rushing yards, of course, they would have. And I don't know if that came out yesterday or the day before. I don't know when I'm going to post this, but I'm going to do running backs today, and you can see the categories are 1,500 plus, 1,150 to 1,499, 800 to 1,149, and 450 to 799, which is a bit of a broad category, I guess, but we'll get into this. There are some players that are not on this list, some rookies, and some other players I will get to at the end of this and tell you how well I think they will do after I'm done. I'll get to that in a little bit, but yes, that's all I have to say. Pretty much, hoping to start recording episodes of my Madden 24 franchise this weekend starting on Saturday. I'm gonna record a few episodes and upload them sporadically throughout the week this weekend. First one will come out either Saturday or Sunday. I've not revealed my team yet. I have the team all picked out, and I'll tell you when I do start that video. But before we get into anything, let's get into these running backs. So let's start off with Khalil Herbert, the Bears' #1 running back now, with no more David Montgomery. Khalil Herbert is an interesting running back to really place. Their running room is stacked. They got Khalil Herbert, they got Dante Foreman, and they drafted Roschon Johnson out of Texas. And they still have Justin Fields, who is a premier rushing threat. I think Fields will be their leading rusher, but I think Herbert can do pretty well. I think he'll be their leading running back rusher. So I'm going to put him at 800 yards. I'm going to give him 6 touchdowns, and I'll give him... Out of the 3 backs they have, he is the receiving back, the biggest receiver. So I'll give him about 400 receiving yards and about 3 touchdowns. So I'll put him in this category. The Bears running game is going to be very interesting how it goes off, but I think the order that this will go is Herbert, Foreman, Johnson, but I'll get into those players later. Next up, we got Christian McCaffrey on the 49ers. I'm going to put him at 1,200 yards for 13 touchdowns. I'm going to give him 900 receiving yards for let's say 6 touchdowns. He's gonna pass 2,000 scrimmage yards, no doubt about it. I think that he is the premier running back on that team, but there are some other guys. There is Elijah Mitchell, who's still gonna play a role. I don't know if he's on this list. I might have to get to him later, but there's gonna be a lot of running from both players, but I think their running game is gonna be pretty good. The 49ers are gonna have one of the best offenses in the league, and the running game is just going to be part of it because Christian McCaffrey is that good. Next up, we got Kenneth Walker, the 3rd. Kenneth Walker had a pretty good rookie season last year. However, he is suffering with a little bit of injuries. So is Zach Charbonnet, the guy they drafted, who I was just going to talk about. Charbonnet might steal some carries. I think they're going to be pretty split on carries. I think he'll have a down year. I'm going to give him 900 yards. I don't know how much he had last year, but I'll give him 900 yards, 8 touchdowns. And I don't know if he's a receiving back, so I'm not going to worry about that. He's going to have some carries taken away by Zach Charbonnet. And they're going to be a very pass-heavy team as well, due to the fact that they have probably one of the best receiver trios in the NFL now. Next up, we got Devin Singletary, who is the backup for the Houston Texans. I'm putting him down here. I'm giving him 500 yards, 3 touchdowns. Dameon Pierce is taking the majority of those carries. Pierce is the premier back in Houston. Singletary wasn't too great in Buffalo. I see the same thing here in Houston. He's not the starter. 500 yards might be even a bit high for Devin Singletary, but we will see. There is questions in the passing game. There are questions around C.J. Stroud, rookie quarterback. They're going to have to rely on the running game. I could see him rushing for about 800 yards as well. But I'm going to put him at 500 yards, 3 touchdowns, just because Dameon Pierce is a good back, and they do have a rookie quarterback who's going to be throwing a lot. Next up is Ezekiel Elliott, newly signed Patriot. I give him He and Ramondre, I don't think they'll break 2,000 yards together, so I'm gonna put him at 800 yards on the dot. I'll put him right there. I'm gonna give him 11 touchdowns just because he's gonna be more of a goal line back. I don't have his yards per carry pretty good just because of that, so I'm gonna put him at 800 yards, 11 touchdowns. It's gonna be the Patriots are gonna have a very interesting season with their running backs and Mac Jones and the receivers. Anything could happen. Next up, we got Breece Hall. Now, Breece Hall is getting some carries taken away by Dalvin Cook now, which I'm very skeptical on how Breece Hall is going to do this year. Of course, they still got Michael Carter as well, who could be having some significant playing time. I do have Breece Hall at 850 yards. I think he could eventually be playing more than Dalvin Cook. But right now, it's very, very tough to decide. I'll put him at 800 yards and 6 touchdowns, and I'll put him about 300 receiving yards. Next up, we got Leonard Fournette, who is not currently signed, but I think Fournette, when he does get signed, I think he will get some contenders to sign him are the Colts, maybe a team like the I already said the Colts, but a team like the Raiders, who are having contract negotiations with Josh Jacobs. Team like the Chargers, Austin Eckler might is still having some negotiations. We may never know. I do think Fournette is gonna not do too great. I'll put him at 750 yards with about 6 touchdowns. He's not really gonna be a premier back in really any offense, but you really don't. He's kind of washed for running back. I think he's more washed than Zeke, so I'm gonna put him there at 750. Next up, we got Josh Jacobs, the Raiders running back. Led the league in rushing yards. I think he'll have a step down this year. I'll give him 1,350 with a total of let's go 15 touchdowns, 500 receiving yards, and I don't know how many receiving touchdowns. The running back room for the Raiders is not good outside of Josh Jacobs. The passing game, they're still gonna throw a lot. They still got Devontae Adams. They signed Jacoby Myers. They got Michael Mayer. I don't know how the running game for this team's going to play out this year. I still think he'll be run a significant amount. I don't think he'll lead the league in rushing by any means, but I think he will be pretty good. So I'm going to put him at 1,350 yards. Next up, we got DeAndre Swift. Another pretty interesting player on the Eagles. They have him and Rashad Penny. And then I think they drafted someone else, but I'm not sure. But Swift in Detroit really didn't do too much. He was a good option, but in Philadelphia, I think he will do much better. I'm going to put him at 850 yards. I think he will be the starting back in Philadelphia. 850 yards. Let's go 9 touchdowns, 600 receiving yards. I think that's pretty fair. I think they're going to run the game a lot. Hurts is going to be the primary rusher still, I think. But I think Swift will outdo him, so I'll put him in the 850 category. Nicholas Chubb, my man. Do I need to say more? He's rushing for 2,000. No, I'm not going to say 2,000 yards. He's rushing for 1,700 yards this season and 22 touchdowns. Nicholas Chubb is the best running back in the league. Changed my mind. The Browns have a deadly team. They got Amari Cooper. They traded for Elijah Moore. They got Cedric Tillman in the draft. They still got David Njoku. And I think Deshaun Watson is going to take a step up. But I still have Nick Chubb leading the league in rushing yards because I think the Browns are in contention to win that division. I know the Bengals are still good. I know everything's still good. But I can see their offense going for like 7,000 yards just because Nick Chubb 7,000 yards might be a bit of a stretch. But over 6,000, maybe 6,500 yards just because Nick Chubb is going to be a dominant force. Kareem Hunt's not going to take any carries from him. So I'll put Nick Chubb at 1,800 yards. Next up, Tyler Algier. I was very disappointed in the Ravens taking Bijan Robinson because I really, really like Tyler Algier. But that running room is very crowded. They have, of course, Bijan, I already say, Tyler Algier. And they also have Cordero Patterson, who I don't know about how Cordero Patterson's going to do. But Tyler Algier is taking a big hit this year. I'm still going to put him at like 750 yards. I can't put him in a tier higher. He's definitely going to take a step back just because of Bijan. I put him at 750 yards. Let's go 4 touchdowns just because I think Bijan is going to get a majority of the touchdowns. And I really feel bad for the guy. I think he was going to have a pretty good year if it wasn't for the Falcons drafting Bijan. Next up, we got Jamal Williams. And for the first 3 games, Jamal Williams is going to be the primary starter. There were some rumors about signing Kareem Hunt. I don't know how that's going to pan out, but I think Jamal Williams for the first 3 weeks is going to start pretty good. I give him 1,000 yards. I think he could have 1,000 yards. I'm going to give him. I don't remember how many touchdowns he had last year. I think he had 17. I'll give him 13 touchdowns because he's going to be the kind of goal line back. But I still have him at like 1,000 yards. I'll give him 1,000 yards. He's not going to do too much, but I think he'll have more than Kamara just because Kamara really isn't a rushing threat. And Williams, I think it's pretty respectable for Jamal Williams to be there. Jonathan Taylor, another running back who, what is happening? The Colts negotiations are really falling. I don't know how he's going to do. I really don't have much to say. I'm going to say Jonathan Taylor's still going to have 1,000 yards. I'll put him at 1,200. I'll put him up here. 1,200 yards, 12 touchdowns. And there's also Anthony Richardson. What can he do in the passing game? I think they're going to run the ball a lot. They still have a pretty decent O-line. What's his face? Richardson's going to run the ball a lot, but I still think Taylor's going to run more than them. Next up, we got Saquon. I got him running for 1,200 yards, just kind of like last year. I'll give him 10 touchdowns. I'm going to give him 12 touchdowns. He's still the primary weapon for the New York Giants. They trade for Darren Waller, but Daniel Jones, I really don't trust him as a passer for them to say, oh, we're going to throw the ball a lot. We're not going to use Saquon as much as we did last year. He's not going to be this bell cow. We're going to use him a little bit less, but he's still going to do well. I still think Daniel Jones can do some stuff, but I really don't trust him enough to have Saquon Barkley having a much lower rushing total. Next up, we got James Cook, who is starting his first full year in Buffalo. We got James Cook. They also signed Damian Harris. I don't know how much he's going to take away from that, but James Cook, I see getting 900 yards just because the Bills are a pass-first team. Josh Allen's also going to run the ball a lot. Of course, Damian Harris is going to do some stuff in the running game. I really don't trust him to do too well, but I trust him to be a decent productive back. I'll put him at 900 yards. I'll give him 8 touchdowns. I just think Josh Allen is going to throw a lot. They have other running backs, like I just said, Damian Harris. So in Nyheim Hines, but I think he's out for a little bit, but he might be back. So I will put him at 900 yards, 8 touchdowns. Next up, we got Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones, I'm going to have at 1,000 yards, and I'm going to put him with 500 rushing yards. Not 500 rushing yards, 600 receiving yards. And I don't know how touchdowns. Touchdowns for Aaron Jones could be very strange with A.J. Dillon. I think he'll have more receiving touchdowns than he will rushing touchdowns. For that reason, I'll give him 7. I'll give him 6 rushing touchdowns. I'll give him 9 receiving touchdowns, though. He's one of the players I will give receiving touchdowns just because he's more of a receiver than he is a true running back. Next up is Raheem Mostert. I don't like Raheem Mostert at all this year. That running back room is also crowded. They have Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson. They signed Devon Achane. They drafted Devon Achane. I give him 600 rushing yards. I don't even think he's going to lead his team in rushing yards. I give him 700. I give him 600 rushing yards, 5 touchdowns. He's fast, but he doesn't have anything. He's over 30. I don't trust him. I don't trust him at all. I don't know who this is. I think this is Kenyon Drake. So, I don't know where to put him. I'll put him here. I really don't have much to say about Kenyon Drake, so not much to say there. Next up, we got Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Clyde Edwards-Helaire isn't even the number 1 back in his system. I got him running for 650 yards, 3 touchdowns. He's a bust. I have to say it. CEH is looking like a bust. He was a first-round pick. Has not lived up to the hype coming out of LSU. I don't really trust him to be a productive first number 1 running back at all. Next up, we have ourselves Travis Etienne. I have Travis Etienne with 1,200 yards. Let's give him 11 touchdowns. This Jags team is a pass-first team, I will say. But Travis Etienne is still good. He's going to be the starter. There really isn't anyone else behind him that I'm too worried about. It drafted somebody, I'm forgetting the name, and they still have that JaMycal Hasty, but neither of them are really good enough. Oh, not Tank Dell. I'm forgetting his name. Tank something. I'm forgetting his name. Tank Bigsby is who they drafted. I don't think either of them are good enough to really compete for the starting job of Travis Etienne, so I'm going to put him up there with 1,300 yards. A.J. Dillon, I think, will have the same, a little bit less than Aaron Jones in rushing yards. I give him 800 rushing yards, but I do have him with 13 rushing touchdowns, just because he is a goal. He's kind of like Jamal Williams almost. He is a goal line back that's gonna thrive off short runs, and he's going to have a lot of them. I don't have him having a good average just because of that, but A.J. Dillon is a good back. Don't get me wrong. He's going to be hard to stop. He's a tough runner. He plays football the right way. I don't know why I just said that. Next up, we got Brian Robinson Jr. As a Commanders fan, I want him to rush for 1,000 yards, but I only got him at 900 and 8 touchdowns, just because he's going to be splitting a lot of carries of Antonio Gibson, who I will get to later. Of course, Eric Bieniemy worked well with Jerick McKinnon, which is what Antonio Gibson is. I think Brian Robinson's still going to be pretty good. He is kind of more like what Isaiah Pacheco is, or Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who, of course, Eric Bieniemy worked with as well as on the Chiefs. I trust Brian Robinson to do pretty well. I still think the passing game is going to be a very decent factor. Sam Howell's going to rush. I don't know how much that's going to affect Brian Robinson. And for that reason, he'll be in at 900 yards, and I'll give him 8 touchdowns. Next up, we got that's not Isaiah Pacheco. That's Jerick McKinnon. Jerick McKinnon, I don't think he'll be as utilized as much without Eric Bieniemy. For that reason, I have him under this 450-yard barrier. I don't know how much I'm going to give him, but he's going to be a gadget player just like he was in Kansas City last year. So I'll give him a decent workload, but he's not going to be a primary runner. He's not going to be a primary receiver. He's really not going to be anything. He'll be like a gadget guy. I just said he'll be like a goal line guy, so I don't have much else to say. Next up, we got Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard, very interesting player. Of course, Zeke is out of the picture now. It is now Tony. Tony, I'm giving him 1,200 yards, 13 touchdowns, and really that's it. And I don't know how great of a receiver is. They drafted Deuce Vaughn in the 6th. And Deuce Vaughn has been showing out in training camp. I see him doing pretty well. I will get to him later. So I think Tony Pollard's going to take a little bit of a hit from him. But I think Pollard's going to do pretty well with in the running game. 1,200 yards, I think, is nothing to scoff at. Of course, 13 touchdowns. They still have a good receiving core around him with Dak Prescott, who is still a good quarterback. I don't care what you say. He's a good quarterback, and Tony Pollard's a good running back. I think that's a pretty good assumption that Tony Pollard could have 1,200 rushing yards. Next up, we got Jahmyr Gibbs, the first-round running back, who was very highly taken. I'm going to give him 900 yards just because he's splitting a lot. I do expect him to be used a lot. I have him at 600 yards as well in the passing game. I have him with 8 rushing touchdowns just because we haven't seen much of what Jahmyr Gibbs can do in the NFL. Of course, David Montgomery's there to help him out. But he's going to get a lot of carries. I could see him at 1,000 yards. I could see him up in this category right here. The Lions drafted him high for a reason, and that's why he's going here. And he's going to get a lot of carries, and they're not going to waste a first-round pick on a running back just to have him do nothing. Next up, we got Derrick Henry, who has lost a step. I will give him about 1,200 yards, a lot like Tony Pollard. Of course, they got Tyjae Spears as well in the draft, and DeAndre Hopkins is going to take a lot of work from him. DeAndre Hopkins is going to get a lot of passing yards. Traylon Burks, it's a question with him. It's a question of that whole entire Cowboys team. The O-line is hurt. Skronsky, though, is going to be a big help, too. Derrick Henry being moved to guard instead of tackle, which I think will help him tremendously in the running game. I got Derrick Henry going with 1,200 yards. I'll give him 13 to 14 touchdowns. Not many receiving yards because it is Derrick Henry. But, yeah. Continuing on, we got Isaiah Pacheco, the primary Chiefs running back. Had a pretty good end to the season last year. I'll put him at 1,000 yards. I'll give him 10 touchdowns, and I'll give him about 300 receiving yards and a few touchdowns like that. Isaiah Pacheco, 7th rounder out of Rutgers, I think. I don't know. Really came into his own last year at the end of the season for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who didn't play well. Jerick McKinnon was still not really a fairly productive back, but I do think Isaiah Pacheco will go for 1,000 yards again, just because that rushing game, there's nothing there. It's Pacheco, I could even see going for 1,200 yards. I could see him up here. I could see Isaiah Pacheco up here, but I'm only going to go with 1,000 just because the passing game is going to be insane still, of course. I don't know what to say. I gotta say Pacheco's 1,000 yards. I gotta keep it realistic because of how much they're gonna pass. I still had Patrick Mahomes throwing for like 5,400 yards. Next up, we got the newly acquired Denver Broncos Samaje Perine. I'm putting him down here. He's really not. Actually, I'll put him at 800 yards. Samaje Perine is coming into a role where he is kind of gonna have a lot of work cut out. Javonte Williams tore his ACL last year, or his Achilles. I don't remember. He's out for the most of the year. Samaje Perine is going to have to work a bit more than I really would have thought in the past. You tell me, oh, the Broncos signed Samaje Perine. Maybe he's just going to not do too great. He's going to not play as much as Javonte Williams. But with Javonte Williams being injured, that is a pretty injured team as well. Of course, Tim Patrick in the receiving game. Russ is going to need a running back that he can rely on. Right now, Williams is that running back, but Samaje Perine might have to be that running back for some time just because of Pacheco's injury. Not Pacheco, for Javonte Williams' injury. Next up, we got the former teammate of Samaje Perine and Joe Mixon, who just had his menacing charge found not guilty. I think he has a bounce back year. I have him running for 1,200 yards. I don't have him up there. I have him running for 1,200 yards, 8 touchdowns. I'll give him about 11 touchdowns. I'll give him about 400 receiving yards as well. The Bengals really don't have a premier running back. I mean, Joe Mixon is kind of a premier running back, but they really don't have anyone else outside of him, so I see him getting a ton of carries. I see Joe Burrow, of course, is still going to throw a lot of passing yards. They still have probably the best receiving trio in the NFL, so it's really tough to dictate how Joe Mixon's going to do, but I think the Bengals have improved a bit, and I think Joe Mixon's going to have a pretty good bounce back here. Next up, we have Kareem Hunt, who has yet to be signed. I think he has negotiated with the Saints, so that's a possibility. He walked out of Indianapolis without a contract, so I won't talk about them. He could go to a team like, I could see him going to a team like the Bills. I could see him going to the Dolphins. I could see him he can still go to the Saints. Kareem Hunt is going to be a very interesting player. I think he'll be in the same category as Leonard Fournette, just because he might not get signed till mid-season. Just for that, I don't think he will do too great. I don't think he's going to be a starting back anywhere unless he signs someplace that needs a starting back, like some places have already mentioned. I could see him going to Houston. I could see him going back to Cleveland, honestly. I could see him going to Dallas. That might be another place I see him going. I like Kareem Hunt. I think he can have a pretty good season. So I'll put him in there. I think he has a good season if he has really a team that he can rely on. That he can... Yeah, I don't know what to say. Okay, continue on. We got Antonio Gibson. I talked about Brian Robinson. I talked about Jerick McKinnon. He's basically Jerick McKinnon in this offense with... Crap, I'm forgetting what his name is. With Eric Bieniemy there. Eric Bieniemy is going to use him a lot in the passing game. I don't have him as a premier rusher. I have him as a premier receiver. I wouldn't be surprised if he switches back to receiver. I have him with 600 rushing yards, maybe less, maybe more, but I could see him having 800 receiving yards and a good amount of receiving touchdowns. And for that reason, I'll put him there in 600 like Isaiah Pacheco. Nothing much to say. He's going to have a lot of carries taken by Brian Robinson, but Brian Robinson will have carries taken by him. But Antonio Gibson can do pretty well. We don't know. Next up, we got D'Onta Foreman, another Bears running back. I think he's going to be the least productive of the 3 Bears running backs. The third one I will get to later in Roschon Johnson. I think he rushes for 600 yards. I do have him having the most rushing touchdowns outside of Justin Fields with 8. I think he will be the goal line back. For that reason, I have him 8 or 9 touchdowns. It's really, really hard to see what's going to happen with this Bears running game. It's Justin Fields and then everyone else. No more David Montgomery. but he's a new signing. He could play an impact really soon. Alvin Kamara has never rushed for 1,000 yards in a season, and he will be suspended for the first 3 games. However, it's just 3 games, unlike DeAndre Hopkins or Deshaun Watson, who were suspended longer. I think Alvin Kamara will have a pretty good season. I do have him at 950 yards and another 600 receiving yards and good amount of receiving touchdowns. I don't have him many rushing touchdowns. I give him 5, but I give him like 7 receiving touchdowns, give or take. He's suspended. He's going to have Jamal Williams take a lot of carries. I already said Jamal Williams is going to rush for more than Alvin Kamara. But I do think this duo could rush for 2,000 yards combined. We don't know. I don't know. We'll see. David Montgomery is due signing for the Detroit Lions. I got him rushing for 800 yards. He proved he can be a very consistent back in Chicago. He's not in Chicago anymore. He's with the Lions. I think he can do pretty good. He's a new running back. He's basically what Jamal Williams was, except just very, very, he's basically Jamal Williams, except a bit worse, I will say. I think he's going to do what Jamal Williams did. I think he'll be a good power back. I don't know what else to say. I don't know. I'm just rambling at this point. Continuing onwards, we got Jeff Wilson. I think he'll be down here with Raheem Mostert. I give him 600 rushing yards, 4 rushing touchdowns. I will get to Devon Achane later. I don't have much to say about Jeff Wilson because he's really not anything special. Austin Eckler is another very interesting player. He had 1,000 yards. I will give him another 1,000 yards, and I will give him 900 receiving yards. I will give him 10 receiving touchdowns, and I will give him 10 rushing touchdowns. You'll have 20 combined touchdowns. Austin Eckler is a good player. Don't get me wrong. He's not in this category, though, just because of all the receiving work he does. For that reason, I'll give him 800 yards, 1,000 yards. I'll give him 1,900 all-purpose yards. He could have 2,000 all-purpose yards. We will see. I don't know. It's Austin Eckler. He's basically a receiver at this point. He's basically the Chargers' #1 receiver, almost. Next up, we got Rachaad White, the new Buccaneer. Hot take, Rachaad White, I'm putting him up here. He's rushing for 1,400 yards. 1,400 yards, I'll give him 16 touchdowns on the year. Baker, I don't know whether to trust Baker or not. I don't think they'll throw too much just because of how he's done in training camp, how he's in the preseason. I don't trust him too much. Rachaad White is going to be, I think, the #1 weapon in that Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense. I liked him last year. He definitely did better than Leonard Fournette, and for that reason, I'll put him in that category. Cam Akers, he's going to have a pretty good season. I'll put him up here too, except he's not going to have as much as Rachaad White. I'll give him about 12,000 yards. Let's go with 14 touchdowns on the ground. We need to see end of 2022. End of 2022 Cam Akers. 2023 he came back into his own, but he came back in the second half. We'll say second half Cam Akers. We need that for a full season. Especially this Rams team is in literal hell. They got Cooper Kupp. Outside of that, they got maybe Tyler Higbee. They need a good running game, and Cam Akers is going to need to bring that. Stafford can't run. They really don't have anyone else, so I'll put him at 1,200 yards and 14 touchdowns. Next up, we got Chuba Hubbard. He is on the Panthers. The Panthers' running game is so strange. I have him for 600 yards, 6 touchdowns. I don't see him doing too much in the running game. With Miles Sanders, Bryce Young can run. I don't think he'll do too much. James Conner, another interesting player. I'll give him 1,300 yards. Like Cam Akers, that team needs a good running game. Kyler Murray is out for probably half the season. Colt McCoy, do you trust Colt McCoy? Do you trust Clayton Tune? Do you trust their offense outside of maybe Marquise Brown? And Kyler's not even going to be back. James Conner is going to be a first half of the season kind of player. Because Kyler's going to get back. He's going to rush. So, Conner, 1,300 yards, 15 touchdowns is pretty reasonable. I think he was second in the league in touchdowns about 2 years ago. So, I can see him returning to that form with the Cardinals not having really an answer at QB or receiver. Next up, we got Ramondre Stevenson. I see people calling him an 1,000-yard rusher. I don't see it. I put him at 800 yards. I think he and Zeke are both going to run for 800 yards. I think Ramondre is going to have less touchdowns. I give him 7 just because he's not as much of a power back as Ezekiel Elliott. I do have him getting like 500 receiving yards, and for that reason, he's going to be at 800 yards, 7 touchdowns, and really nothing else. I can't really trust him too much. Next up, we got Cordarrelle Patterson. He is the third back on this stacked, tight Falcons running back with Tyler Algier and Bijan Robinson. I got Cordarrelle Patterson, 500 rushing yards, 500 receiving yards, 5 touchdowns, and 5 receiving touchdowns. He's gonna have 5 all over the place, and he's gonna have 500 returning yards. I don't know what I'm doing right now. Nothing much to say about Cordarrelle Patterson. Dalvin Cook, the big surprise to free agency, signed to the Jets. I think he'll be, I don't remember what I said for Breece Hall. I think he'll be around there, maybe a little bit less, but I do have him more touchdowns. I give him 13 touchdowns. They signed him because he's a good running back. I don't care. He's not washed. He's lost a step, I'll say that, but he's not washed. You cannot call Dalvin Cook washed. You cannot call Zeke washed. I mean, you can, but you can call him whatever, but I don't think he's washed at all. Next up, we got Bijan Robinson. I was very surprised that they took him. They still got Tyler Algier. I have him with 1,300 yards. I have him 500 receiving yards, and I have him I can see him winning Offensive Rookie of the Year with 14 rushing touchdowns. He is a good player. Don't get me wrong. I'm just disappointed that I think the Falcons were not a great team to take him just because their running game is already there. I would have liked to see him fall a little bit farther just because the Falcons are taking a luxury pick of him, but that's besides the point. 1,300 yards, 14 rushing touchdowns, I think is perfect for him. J.K. Dobbins, another big question mark. I think Lamar will be the primary running back, but can J.K. Dobbins stay healthy for an entire season? No, he cannot. I shouldn't jump to conclusions. He is still on... I think he just got activated off a PUP, but I really cannot say anything about J.K. Dobbins. I don't know what to say. I got him 800 yards, 10 touchdowns on the ground. It's really tough with Lamar rushing. I can't really trust him. And this new receiving core, I don't know what to say. Next up, we got Javonte Williams. Talked about Samaje Perine earlier up here. I have him in the same category as Perine. I have him at 900 rushing yards, 13 touchdowns. I think Russ is going to have to rely on the running game. I already said, it's basically what I just said for Samaje Perine. There's nothing else to say about him. Let's continue onwards. Next up, we got Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders is in an interesting situation. Played for the Eagles and now is on the Panthers. He's with the rookie quarterback in Bryce Young. He has Chuba Hubbard still in the backfield. I don't know what to say. I have Miles Sanders with 11,000 rushing yards, 1,100 rushing yards, 12 rushing touchdowns, and that's really it. Rookie quarterback, I think Bryce Young is going to run. I already said that. But I still think he's going to need to rely on Miles Sanders before he can really take control of the offense entirely. So continuing onwards, we have ourselves Dameon Pierce. Dameon Pierce, I have him right with Nick Chubb at 1,500 yards. I think he is second in the league in rushing yards. I got him with 19 touchdowns on the ground as well. I don't remember. I don't think it's as much as Nick Chubb on rushing yards, but I think Dameon Pierce is going to be that primary weapon for the Houston Texans. They don't have anyone at receiver. They got Bobby Trees and John Mechie, who are not proof. Bobby Trees is proven to be mid, and John Mechie is going to be his first actual season. He's basically a rookie at this point. Dameon Pierce, I'll put him at 1,500 yards, 19 touchdowns. C.J. Stroud's going to need a running back that he can rely on, and I think Dameon Pierce is that running back. Next up, we got Najee Harris. I got him at 1,250. He's going to have a step up year. I'm going to give him 13 rushing touchdowns. The passing game, I don't trust. I don't know if I can trust Kenny Pickett yet. I don't know if I can really trust anyone on that offense, really, except for maybe Najee and George Pickens and Big Pat. I don't have anything else to say for the running back and Najee Harris. Now, some running backs who are not here. Let's start off with Damian Harris of the Bills. I have him rushing for 500. I have him rushing for about 750 yards, 7 touchdowns. He's going to help James Cook out a bit just because James Cook is the second-year player. I don't know what to say about. Don't really know what else to say. Nyheim Hines, I don't think he's going to play as much. I'll give him like 300 rushing yards just because he's injured right now. I'll give him 2 rushing touchdowns. Now some of the rookies that are not here. Let's start off with, what is the name of the running? Oh, Broshawn Johnson. I think he's going to do less than Khalil Herbert. I got him at 700 rushing yards on the dot. Give him about 6 rushing touchdowns. This Bears running game could possibly end with 3,000 yards of the ground. I don't know if that's going to happen, but we will see just because it is a very interesting situation. I'm going to give 2 more running backs. The next one's going to be Deuce Vaughn. Deuce Vaughn of the Cowboys. I got him 600 yards on the ground. He's shifty. He's tiny. He can do anything. He's tiny. He's like my dick. He's tiny. He can run. He can run. Don't clown on my man. And lastly, we got ourselves, I'm going to talk about Devon Achane. I think he leads, not the league, but leads the Dolphins in rushing yards. I'll give him 950 rushing yards on the ground. He's going to do pretty well. I'll give him 6 or 7 rushing touchdowns on the year. It's going to be a primarily passing offense with Tua, Tyreek, and Jalen. But I think we can see a pretty good year from Devon Achane and maybe take home the best rookie running back award. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please leave your comments down in the comment section below if you agree or not with these takes. If you don't agree, that is you are wrong, because everything I say goes. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed, and please subscribe for future videos like this. And I'll see you guys next time, which will hopefully be Madden 23, Madden 24, blank franchise.